Chapter 19. I look from my cousin to my aunt. That is assuming they really are my cousin and my aunt. Assuming I can't believe anything I've been told since I left Pennsylvania 3 days ago. Joss, you weren't supposed to say anything about that, Marilee says. Not until I have a chance to talk to Walter. What? You have to get permission to talk? Joss asks. I promised I'd protect Bethany, Marilee says. She's only 12. The same age I was when I lost my entire family, Josh says. You still have me, Marilee says. I might as well have lost you too, that first year or so. I know, I was kind of emotionally absent, I'm sorry. They have a strange way of arguing, their voices getting softer and slower instead of louder and angrier, their points of view getting closer together instead of farther apart. But it's like they've forgotten I'm even here. What are you protecting me from? I demand. Marilee and Josh look at one another, and Marilee shrugs. I don't know, Marilee says apologetically. Your dad said to keep you safe, and Thursday night I thought that just meant the basics, food and shelter and compassion while your mother was having a breakdown, I say, going crazy. Marilee frowns, but she doesn't correct me. Why was Elizabeth's last name different from mine? I persist. She had the same last name as her parents, Marilee says. Elizabeth Cruel, Walter, and Hillary Cruel. Their name is Cole, I say stubbornly. Cole, you heard me say that on the phone Thursday night. It didn't register then, Marilee says. Cole and Cruel sound so much alike, and I was feeling a little overwhelmed. I didn't know you had a different last name until Friday at the Y when you spelled it for Ronald Bosdorfer's mom. I wanted to ask your dad about it before I said anything to you, just in case. But I haven't had much of a chance to talk to Walter. So I was going to be, she glares at Joss, discreet. Joss ignores the glare and leans forward. Why would Aunt Hillary and Uncle Walter change their names, she asks Bethany. As far as you know, has your last name always been Cole? Yeah, I say, but suddenly I'm not so sure. I squint, trying to focus on a vague memory of being a little kid, sitting in a too large, too stiff chair in front of a too cheerful man in some official place, a bank or an insurance office, maybe a car dealership. The man's handing my dad a stack of papers saying, I think that will be everything, Mr. and Mrs. Had he said Cole? Or had it been Burns or Stern or something like that? I think I tell Marilee and Joss. Uncle Walter and Aunt Hillary using an alias, it's kind of hard to imagine, Joss says. I turn to Marilee. Don't try to protect me, I say. Tell me the truth. The truth is, I haven't understood anything about Walter and Hillary since June 13th, 1991, Marilee says. She holds her hands out, palms up, a gesture of innocence. I'm as puzzled as you are. It's impossible not to believe Marilee. It's impossible not to look at her kind, troubled, sympathetic face and not feel a little comforted. Even if I do feel like I've been zapped into the twilight zone. A name's a pretty basic thing, Mom and Dad, I think. Why wouldn't you even tell me about that? Well, Joss says, because we've all fallen silent, staring bleakly at a cake so we no longer have any appetite for. Where's Uncle Walter's phone number? I'm going to call him right now. Clear this all up. He didn't leave a number, Marilee says. Bethany and I are just supposed to wait for his calls. Joss lets out an exasperated snort. Come on, Mom, she says. You were a lawyer's wife. Weren't you worried about liability issues? At the church, we have to have people sign all sorts of legal forms just to leave their kids with us for a couple of hours of preschool twice a week. Uncle Walter gave you Bethany for who knows how long, and he didn't leave you a phone number? If there was an emergency, you wouldn't even be allowed to authorize medical treatment for her. You know me, Marilee says. I wasn't thinking about liability. I was worried about Hillary and Walter and Bethany. Marilee reaches out and puts her hand on my shoulder, draws me toward her. She is my aunt. Joss is my cousin. I'm sure of it. But the longer I'm in Sanderfield, the less I know about my parents. Marilee releases me from her hug. She and Joss carry off plates and glasses, scrape our half-eaten cake slices into the trash. They stand at the sink washing and drying dishes. I don't move. I'm frozen in place at the table. Joss comes and sits across from me. She lowers her head so her eyes peer directly into mine. What can we do? She asks. How can we help? Find my parents, I want to say. Make them act normal. Make them tell me the truth, the whole truth. Give me answers. I remember that Joss claims to know more about questions than answers. I swallow hard. Tell me the rest of your story, I say, about you and Elizabeth making up your personality profiles for the Olympics. Joss looks relieved that I'm asking for something she can deliver, or maybe she's just happy that I'm still capable of talking. I can do better than that, Joss says. I can show you the profiles we acted out. We begged and forced Dad and Uncle Walter to tape them. I'm sure Mom has some of those tapes around here. A shadow of something like doubt crosses her face. That is, if you want to see those tapes. I do, I say, with more certainty than I feel. Ever since Marilee told me about Elizabeth, I've avoided asking to see so much as a picture of her, even though I'm sure Marilee has some of those laying around her house somewhere too. And now I'm agreeing to watch a video of her, walking and talking, fully alive. Be strong, I tell myself, and it bothers me that those are the same words my father used. The videotapes, it turns out, are in a closet of an unused bedroom upstairs. It takes all three of us to shift around the dusty boxes, dig in past the fraying cupboard flaps. While we're looking for these tapes, we find one whole box full of Joss's old gymnastic trophies and ribbons. You were such a star, Marilee says wistfully, a touch of awe in her voice as she stares down at the still, shiny statuettes. You could have gone to the Olympics. It didn't matter to me after the accident, Joss says impatiently. It wasn't worth it without Elizabeth. I feel like I'm hearing a replay of an old argument. Elizabeth must have had a box of trophies just like this too, I think. I wonder what Mom and Dad did with them. I think about our many moves. We had boxes that just traveled from the attic in one house to the basement of another. Were some of those boxes full of Elizabeth's belongings? Would I have found out about Elizabeth all by myself back home if I'd just shown a bit more curiosity, nosed around a little? No, I think bitterly, Mom or Dad would have never let me out of their sight long enough to discover anything on my own. Still, I suppress a shiver that I might have been too close to everything Elizabeth left behind, just one floor away my entire life. Joss pulls on a box that promptly tears apart in her hand, spilling out old-fashioned videotapes. She barely manages to catch a monstrous old-style camcorder that slides out of the top of the box. Good grief, Mom, Joss says in an exaggerated disgust. Didn't you ever read the passage in the Bible about not storing up your treasures where dust and moth can consume them? Yeah, Miss Smartmouth Preacher, and I know the point of that passage is about aiming toward heaven, not spending a fortune at the Container Store, Marilee says, giving Joss a playful swat on the shoulder. But this is my childhood disintegrating before my eyes, Joss says, still in a tone of mock disgust. I'm glad you can joke about these things now, Marilee says softly, turning toward Joss. Their eyes locked, and I feel like an outsider again for a moment. I can only guess at the undercurrent of emotion beneath their banter. If I'd had a childhood like Joss's, with the same tragic end, would I want to keep all the mementos? Joss glances my way, then back at her mother. Seriously, Mom, you should think about transferring all these tapes to DVD before they completely fall apart, she says. You're welcome to take on that chore, Marilee says. I'm too busy feeding the hungry, visiting the sick, preaching to the non-believers, Joss says. Especially, mister, you used a lot of words today. And I've got my hands full right now trying to teach Anthony Doolin the alphabet, Marilee says, grinning. Maybe I could make the DVDs for you, I say, and the other two turn to me in surprise. I swallow hard. I mean, if I'm here very long, I could. I'm actually pretty good with electronics. And then I prove my boast by being the only one who can figure out how to hook up the camcorder to the unwieldy old DCR that Marilee also has to dig out of a closet. It makes me feel smart and capable and in control for the first time since I left home. Ah, the wisdom of the younger generation, Joss jokes. Born with a remote control in each hand. What would we do without you? We couldn't watch these videotapes, that's what, Marilee says, settling into a corner of the couch. You could have just asked one of your kindergartners to come over and set up everything for you, offered them extra credit, Joss says. And have them find out how stupid I am? Marilee says, no way. The joking stops as I cue up the tape we've plucked out of the box labeled 1990. Marilee inhales sharply and Joss clutches her hand. Behind the flashing block showing the date and time, 2:04 p.m., August 5th, 1990. There's a man on the screen. He's a few inches too short to be the proverbial tall, dark, and handsome, but he's nice looking in a middle-aged kind of way. He's sitting on a couch reading a newspaper. The Sanderfield Reporter, I notice. Dad, Joss explains unnecessarily. Tom Wilker doesn't seem to know he's being taped. He turns a page of the newspaper. Here we are, a girl's voice whispers from out of range of the camera in a manner of nature documentaries, stalking that rare creature, Mayoress Sanderfieldus, in his native habitat. The sound is so distorted I can't tell if the voice is Joss's or not. Do people sound the same at 11 or 12 as they do as adults? You doofus, another voice says. He's not in his native habitat. We're at Grandma's. And he's not rare. He's not just rare. He's unique. One of a kind. He's the only sitting mayor of Sanderfield. All the others would be Mayoress Sanderfieldus Emeritus. Somehow I know this is Elizabeth. Her voice even sounds a little like mine when I'm being smart-alecky. Would that change if he stood up? Get it? Sitting mayor, standing up. Is that Joss standing up to Elizabeth? Both girls crack up, their laughter providing a kind of soundtrack as Tom lowers his newspaper and smiles toward the camera. Hi, girls. What are you up to? He asks lazily, a man who doesn't know he's got less than a year to live. Since all you adults are too busy to tape us, we've decided we'd tape you, Joss says into the video. I was such a brat, the adult Joss says beside me. How'd you guys put up with me? We loved you, Marilee says. Yeah, but why was I a brat on tape? Joss asks. This might ruin my chances of ever being elevated to Pope. You're not Catholic, Marilee says, laughing. I guess they've gotten over the shock of seeing their deceased husband, father, on the TV screen. I don't know how they can joke around like that, and I've missed some of the conversation on the tape. Yes, this is manipulation and blackmail of a public official, Elizabeth is saying now. What are you going to do? Arrest us? No, I'm going to. Tom lunges toward the camera, his face suddenly eerily large. Then his view swings around wildly, showing first the wood panels of the floor, then the maroon walls and the white ceiling. Steal the camera from you and film the best darn Olympic profile ever. The screen goes black. He fell for it, Joss says. She has tears in her eyes. He always was a soft touch. For you, Marilee agrees. A picture reappears on the screen. This time it's two girls in red, white, and blue leotards standing on their hands in a huge expanse of grass. Joss and Elizabeth, one dark-haired, one blonde. I can't see their faces because they have their backs to the camera, but I can tell how muscular their arms and legs are. They're perfectly matched and perfectly still, like statues, their toes pointed to the sky. Am I supposed to read this? Tom's voice comes from behind the camera. One of them must have said yes, because he clears his throat and launches into, in tiny Sanderfield, Illinois, population 8,500. Hey girls, you should make that 8,501, because Jody Smuckers had her baby last night, and... Daddy! The voice is dim, but the outrage is clear. Okay, I'll just go on. He makes his voice sound pompous, like a TV newscaster. Two girls, cousins and best of friends, showed an athletic promise at a very young age. Elizabeth Kroll turned somersaults in her crib. Jocelyn Wilker began practicing cartwheels at age 3. And now, after years of hard work and dedication, they're fulfilling that early promise at the Olympics. The two statues' gymnasts exploded into motions, turning the handstands into back walkovers, round-off leaps, and spin. Aren't they amazing, folks? Tom Wilker asks. The screen goes dark again, and then the scene changes. The camera is moving toward a house. The very house I'm sitting in now, I realize. But the house looks different because it's summertime on the screen, and everything is green and lush. A riot of petunias and marigolds and pansies and geraniums line the sidewalk and spill out from hanging baskets on the porch. The two girls are in shorts and t-shirts now, and they're sitting on a wicker porch swing hanging near the front door. I feel a pang remembering how that first night I'd imagined the porch as setting for an early 1900s happy family movie. It had been the scene of happy times, but it had been in the late 1900s, and the happy family had been Joss and Elizabeth, Marilee, Tom, Mom, and Dad. We caught up with the two girls recently at their grandmother's house to talk to them about their brilliant careers. Tom narrates as he walks the camera up the porch steps and toward the girls. "Hi, girls." "Hi," they both say, and there's a scraping noise that must be Tom pulling up a chair. The camera zooms in and goes temporarily fuzzy. "How'd the two of you get interested in gymnastics?" Tom asks. "Well, we always liked being active." It's Elizabeth's voice. The camera zooms in closer, swinging even further out of focus. "Our mom started us in dance lessons when we were 3 years old, but that was so sedentary." I hear Joss giggling in the background on screen. Camera. Elizabeth pauses to glare at her cousin, then goes on. "Then in 1984... I don't hear the rest of what Elizabeth is saying because the camera is finally in focus. Elizabeth's face fills the whole TV screen, and I can see every freckle, every light hair of her eyelashes and eyebrows, and the freckles are just like mine. A light smattering across the bridge of her nose, a few more on the right cheek than the left. The eyelashes and eyebrows are just like mine, wispy and hard to see. The nose and eyes and mouth and heart-shaped face structured are the same too. The only way I can tell I'm not just looking in a mirror is that Elizabeth isn't wearing glasses, and she has braces on her teeth. I got my braces off last year." I gasp. Marilee reaches over and takes my hand. "Should we stop the tape?" Joss asks. "No," I murmur weakly. "This isn't too strange. We're sisters," I tell myself. "Sisters look alike. Like Mom. And Marilee. Mary-Kate and Ashlyn Olsen from that old TV show Full House. Okay, they're twins. How about my friend? But I can't think of any friends. Or even acquaintances. Who look so much like their sisters. Elizabeth and I are identical except for the glasses." "Look how much Elizabeth is blinking," Marilee says. "Remember how determined she was that those contacts were going to work out?" "Oh, I think, and it's like I've had yet another bombshell dropped on me." But I force myself to keep watching the TV screen, and I notice a few small differences. Elizabeth has a tiny scar just above her lips that gives her whole face a mischievous look. Her eyes light up and she bounces in her seat while she talks, as if it's impossible for her to keep all her energy and enthusiasm bottled up. I don't think I've ever looked that self-confident and unguarded, even in the days before Mom started crying full-time. "And what do you do in your spare time besides gymnastics?" Tom asks from behind the camera. "Oh, we don't have spare time," Joss says, and Tom swings the camera toward her. "We don't even have time to do our homework except in the car on the way to gymnastics. It's always practice, practice, practice. We have to work really hard." Up close, 11-year-old Joss's face looks shocking. Face shocks me nearly as much as Elizabeth's. Joss looks not just smaller and younger, but unformed somehow, as if the pieces that are going to come together to make the grown-up Joss aren't all there yet. Her dark green eyes seem a little vacant, and she seems to be trying too hard to be as enthusiastic and peppy as Elizabeth. "Yes, we do practice a lot, but I have other interests besides gymnastics," Elizabeth says, and Tom focuses the camera back on her. "I like to run and paint and read and watch TV and go to the movies. In fact, when I grow up and I'm too old to be a gymnast, I'm going to go to Hollywood and be a set designer. Either that or be a rank couture. That's someone who tells story." Beside me, Joss laughs. "I'd almost forgotten how much Elizabeth liked using big words that no one else knew," she said. "I mean, rank couture from a 12-year-old. Marilee chuckles too, and neither of them seem to notice that I've gone stiff with horror. I'm the one that wants to be a movie set designer, I think. I'm the one that likes to collect unusual words. In fact, rank couture is exactly the kind of word I would have added to my list, though it's ruined for me now. Is it because Elizabeth and I were raised by the same parents, I wonder? Did they do something to make both of us love words and movies?" As if on cue, I hear my mother's voice from the TV. "Girls, where are you?" she calls in the distance. "Time to go home." "And here are the parents of the two gymnastics prodigies," Tom says, turning the camera toward Mom's voice. "Walter and Hillary Krull and Marilee Wilker and her husband. Can't think where her husband could have gotten to. Tell the viewers of America, what's it like having such talented daughters? Exhausting." I think that's Marilee's voice, but once again, the camera is taking a long time to focus, so it's hard to tell. 3 blurry people are stepping out of the front door onto the porch. 1 tall, 2 short. And then the focus finally kicks in and I see my parents and Marilee as they used to be. They all look so young, it's tempting to think of them as kids as well. None of them have any wrinkles. Mom and Marilee both have blonde hair as radiant as Elizabeth's. My dad isn't stooped over at all, but stands tall and straight and proud, with a full head of longish, sandy-colored hair. An older, white-haired woman joins them at the door, the real Marilee, I think. But no, it's the grandmother passing out goodbye hugs and calling out, "Come for Sunday dinner next week, too, same time." I hear Elizabeth off camera asking, "Mom, can Joss come home with us?" And then Joss complaining, "Dad, you don't need to tape this, the profile's over." "Oh, all right," he says agreeably, and the screen goes black, then turns to fuzz. The real-life, present-day adult Joss sighs beside me. "I wish he'd taped it all," she says, "every single second." She hits a button on the remote, shutting off the TV, and the 3 of us blink, resurfacing from the past. Chapter 21. We don't really talk about the video. Marilee and Joss seem a little lost in their memories, and I'm struggling to act normal while carrying an internal debate. She didn't look that much like me. Yes, she did. No, she didn't. "Want to play cards or something?" Joss finally asks. Marilee and I both shrug, but that's all the encouragement Joss needs. She pulls out an Uno Robot Attack, the old-fashioned card game jazzed up with a little robot that shoots out cards when you least expect it. I've played it a few times at friends' house, although all that we have at home is the original game. "I thought you were crazy when you gave me this last Christmas," Marilee says, pepping up a little bit, "but it's actually a pretty fun game." After a few rounds, all 3 of us are much more energized, throwing down the hip 4 Robo-Scum cards with great relish. Marilee's even laughing again. "When I was a little girl, my great Aunt Agatha would have been scandalized by the notion of playing cards on a Sunday," she says, "and with a minister no less." "Your great Aunt Agatha obviously had no sense of humor," Joss says, "and no appreciation for the importance of playfulness in God's world." She hits the button on top of the attack robot and groans when it spits 6 cards at her. "Appreciate playfulness, remember?" Marilee taunts her. She frowns at her own handful of cards. "Sorry, Bethany, this is the only green card I have." She puts down a zap hit fire card, which usually would mean that I'm at the mercy of the robo attack too. "Oh, don't be sorry," I say. "Save your pity for yourself." I lay down my throwback attack card, which makes her, not me, the robot's victim. "Great play," Josh crows. She throws her arm around my shoulder as the 2 of us are ganging up on Marilee. "Oh, Elizabeth," she says, "it's so nice having you back. I've missed." She gets a stricken look on her face. "You," she finishes lamely. All 3 of us freeze. The attack robot's eyes flash red and green and yellow like some malfunctioning traffic signal. Stop. Go. Caution. "I wish we could pretend I didn't say that," Joss says quietly. "I know you're not Elizabeth. I'm sorry." The attack robot hums at us. Joss and Marilee stare at me, their expressions mirroring one another, mixtures of regret and compassion and confusion and fear. "Am I really that much like her?" I ask forlorningly. "Yes." "And no," Marilee says at the same time that Joss says no. "Yes." They look at each other and shrug. "You saw the video," Marilee says apologetically. "There's a strong resemblance. It's like you know how things look different when you look at them out of the corner of your eye instead of straight on," Joss says. "Out of the corner of my eye, you are Elizabeth. Same features, same expression, same person. But straight on, you're different." "You're a lot quieter than Elizabeth," Marilee says. "More self-contained." "Elizabeth could be such a spaz," Joss says. "Hyperkinetic, and so sure of herself. I'm going to be in the Olympics. I'm going to win more gold medals than anyone else. I'm going to be the most famous gymnast ever." "She was ambitious," Marilee agrees. "Hillary was like that too as a child, and then when Elizabeth was born, she transferred all her ambition to her daughter." She glances towards me as if she wonders if she should have said that. I am also Hillary's daughter. I think back to the years before my mother cried full time. Was my mother ambitious for me? "Oh, honey, don't worry about it. You're doing the best you can," she'd tell me when I was little and couldn't quite manage to color inside the lines. "You don't need those friends. You've got Mommy and Daddy," she'd tell me in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade when I fretted about my ranking in the various popularity contests of school. "Let's just stay at home together," she'd say when I suggested going about anywhere, the skating rink, the zoo, a play. If I pushed at all, she'd give in, but I had to push. My mother isn't ambitious for me, I think. She's done everything she can to hold me back. I shoved myself away from the table and the Uno attack robot and Marilee and Joss. "I don't want to play anymore," I say, sounding just like a spoiled little kid. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." "That's fine, dear," Marilee says. "I'll see you tomorrow," Joss says. "Good night." They watch me climb the stairs. I know they will talk about me after they think I'm in bed, out of earshot. I'm tempted to creep back down to the landing, press my ear against the wall, and listen out of sight. Instead, I pull my pillow over my head and clutch it tightly to my ears so there's no danger of any sound leaking in.